The phone was buzzing in my hand when I should have been halfway out the door. I had already picked out my navy shawl, the one with the soft fringe that caught the light just right. I'd combed my hair back into that neat bun I always wore to my daughter's dinners. I'd even put on lipstick, something I rarely bothered with anymore at 67. Everything was ready. I was ready. And then Ilara's name flashed across my screen. Ilara Finch. My lawyer. The woman who only contacted me when something was burning down or about to. The text was 3 words: call me immediately. My stomach dropped before my brain could catch up. I pressed dial with shaking fingers, my reflection staring back at me from the hallway mirror. A woman dressed for a pleasant evening, eyes wide with sudden fear. Nadine. Her voice came through clipped and urgent, the way it sounded in courtrooms. Don't go to your daughter's house tonight. Not until we talk. What? Why? My voice came out thin, strangled. I received a legal notice this afternoon. Your daughter has filed documents claiming full ownership of your house and all your accounts. She's moving to transfer everything into her name. If I hadn't caught the timestamps when I did, it would already be processed. The words landed like punches. Each one precise. Each one impossible. My daughter. My only child. The girl I had raised alone through 2 jobs and late rent payments and grocery store math. The woman I had built my entire life around. That's not possible, I whispered, but even as I said it, something cold was spreading through my chest. The documents bear your signature, Ilara continued. Or what's supposed to be your signature. I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And Nadine, she paused. Don't let her know that you know. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I set it down on the dresser, my hand still trembling, and looked at myself again in that mirror. Same navy shawl. Same lipstick. But the woman staring back at me looked suddenly hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that mattered. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The house around me, my house, the one I'd scraped together a down payment for in 1989, the one I'd painted and patched and paid off cent by cent, suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Like I was already a ghost haunting rooms that no longer knew my name. In the kitchen, the oak table still had the faint pencil marks along one leg where I'd measured my daughter's height every birthday. 5 feet 2 inches, October 1998. 5 feet 6 inches, October 2001. The last mark, October 2004, before she went to college and stopped letting me measure her. I traced those marks with my fingertip in the darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. Had I missed something? Some shift in her voice, some coldness in her eyes at Christmas? Had my careful devotion, every sacrifice, every late shift, every skipped meal so she could have new school clothes, had all of it somehow rotted into entitlement without me noticing? The refrigerator hummed its familiar sound. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the ceiling. Normal sounds. An ordinary Thursday evening in October. Except nothing was ordinary anymore. My phone buzzed again. A text this time from my daughter. Mom, are you still coming? I made your favorite, pot roast with those little potatoes you like. See you at 7. My hands went numb reading it. She had typed those words, cheerful, loving, innocent, while somewhere on her computer, documents with my forged name were sitting in files, waiting to erase me. She had planned a dinner, set a table, prepared my favorite meal, all while actively stealing my life. I typed back with fingers that barely worked, not feeling well tonight, sweetheart. Rain check. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, oh no. Do you need me to come check on you? I stared at that message until my eyes burned. No, I typed. Just need rest. Love you. Love you too, Mom. Feel better. I set the phone face down on the table and sat in the dark, listening to my own breathing, wondering if love was just another word we used to make betrayal easier to swallow. The navy shawl was still draped across the chair where I'd left it, ready for a dinner that would never happen. And somewhere in a filing cabinet or a computer or a lawyer's office, my name, my signature, my identity, had already been erased by the only person I thought would never hurt me. What would you do if the person you trusted most was trying to erase you from your own life? Would you have seen it coming, or would you be just as blind as I was? I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't even pretend to try. I stayed at that kitchen table until the sky started turning gray, my fingers tracing the same grooves in the wood over and over. The house felt different now, like it was already saying goodbye to me. Like the walls knew something I was just beginning to understand. When the sun finally came up, I made coffee I didn't drink and toast I couldn't swallow. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept thinking about the day I signed the mortgage papers for this house. I was 32 years old, a single mother with a 6-year-old daughter and 2 part-time jobs that barely added up to 1 full income. The bank officer had looked at me like I was crazy, like women like me didn't get to own houses. But I'd saved every penny for 3 years. Every single one. And my daughter had been right there with me, holding my hand, saying, "We're going to have our own house, Mommy?" I'd kissed her forehead and promised her, "Yes, baby. Our own house. Forever." Forever turned out to have an expiration date I never saw coming. Around 8 in the morning, my phone rang. My daughter's name lit up the screen, and for a second I almost didn't answer. But old habits, mother habits, die hard. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Mom, you sound terrible. Are you sure you're okay? I can bring you some soup." The concern in her voice sounded so real, so genuine. And that's what made it worse, knowing she could fake it this well, or maybe not even knowing she was faking it at all. "I'm fine, just a little under the weather. Don't worry about me." "I always worry about you," she said, and I heard her smile through the phone. "You're my mom." My throat closed up. I managed to say something about needing rest and hung up before my voice could break. She called me Mom. She said she worried about me. And somewhere in her files, my forged signature was probably sitting next to transfer documents, waiting to make me homeless. I looked around my kitchen, the cabinets I'd painted myself in 1995, the curtains I'd sewn from clearance fabric, the dish towel hanging on the oven handle that said "World's Best Mom," a Mother's Day gift from when she was 12. Had she ever meant any of it? Or had I been raising a stranger who was just waiting for the right moment to take everything? The doorbell rang at 9 o'clock sharp. Elara, punctual as always, standing on my porch with a leather folder tucked under her arm and an expression that told me everything I needed to know. This was bad. "Let's sit down," she said gently. We sat at that same kitchen table, and she opened the folder. Inside were copies, clean, official-looking copies, of documents that claimed to be mine but weren't. "These were filed 3 days ago," Elara said, pointing to the date stamp. "They declare that you've gifted your property and all savings to your daughter as an advance inheritance. Your signature is here, here, and here." I stared at the signatures. They looked like mine. The loops and slants were almost perfect. But they weren't mine. "I didn't sign these," I whispered. "I know you didn't." Elara flipped to another page. "Look at this notary stamp. October 14th. Where were you on October 14th? My mind went blank for a second, then clicked. I was at the clinic. Blood work for my annual physical. I have the appointment card on my fridge. Elara's eyes lit up. That's what I needed to hear. You have proof you were somewhere else when these documents claim you were signing them. She pulled out more papers, spreading them across my table like evidence at a crime scene. Dates, times, locations. All wrong. All impossible. This wasn't sloppy work, Ilara said quietly. Whoever did this was careful. Methodical. They just didn't count on you having an alibi. I felt something twist in my chest. Because whoever did this wasn't some stranger. It was my daughter. My only child. The girl I'd taught to write her name, who'd practiced her signature on notebook paper at this very table when she was learning cursive. She'd traced my hand. Studied my writing. Planned this. How long has she been planning this? I asked, my voice barely there. Ilara looked at me with something like pity. Long enough to make it convincing. Long enough to think she'd get away with it. Outside, a car door slammed. I glanced toward the window and my blood froze. My daughter's car was pulling into my driveway. She was here. Right now. And she had no idea I knew what she'd done. Have you ever had to face someone you love while knowing they betrayed you? How do you even breathe in that moment? I watched through the kitchen window as my daughter got out of her car, carrying a container. Probably that soup she'd offered on the phone. She looked so normal. Hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing her work clothes, smiling like this was just another Thursday. Like she wasn't actively trying to steal my life. What do I do? I whispered to Ilara. Act normal, she whispered back, quickly gathering the papers and shoving them into her folder. Don't let her know anything's changed. Can you do that? I nodded, but I wasn't sure. How do you hug someone who's erasing you? How do you smile at someone who forged your name? The doorbell rang. I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and walked to the door like I was walking to my own execution. When I opened it, my daughter's face lit up with concern. Mom, you look awful. I brought chicken soup. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the way she always did. This was her childhood home. She'd never needed permission before. But now every step she took felt like trespassing. Oh, Ilara's here, my daughter said, noticing the lawyer at my kitchen table. Her smile flickered, just for a second, before settling back into place. Everything okay? Just going over some estate planning, Ilara said smoothly, standing up. Nothing urgent. I was just leaving. My daughter set the soup container on the counter, her eyes darting between us. Estate planning? Mom, is something wrong? Are you sick? The concern in her voice sounded so real I almost believed it myself. Just being prepared, I managed to say. You know how it is. She moved closer, reaching out to touch my forehead like she used to when I was the one checking her for fevers. You're clammy. Have you been resting? I pulled back slightly, and something changed in her eyes. Just a flash, suspicion, maybe, or calculation, before the concerned daughter mask slipped back on. I'm fine, sweetheart. Really. Just tired. Ilara gathered her things and headed for the door, giving me a look that said be careful without using words. When the door closed behind her, I was alone with my daughter for the first time since learning the truth. She started unpacking the soup, pulling out a pot, turning on the stove, making herself at home in my kitchen like she'd done 1,000 times before. Except now I knew. Now I understood that every time she'd been here, she'd probably been calculating. Measuring. Planning. Mom, I've been thinking, she said, stirring the soup. You're getting older, and this house is a lot for you to manage. Have you ever considered downsizing? Maybe moving into one of those nice senior communities? My heart stopped. She was already setting up the narrative. Already preparing the story she'd tell people when I was suddenly homeless. Oh, Mom wanted to downsize. It was her idea. I like my house, I said quietly. I know. But wouldn't it be easier? Less to worry about? I could help you find a place. We could do it together. Together. Like we were partners in this. Like she wasn't actively stealing it from under me. I watched her stir that soup, the same hands that had forged my signature, the same smile that had lied to my face, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't just taking my house. She was rewriting my whole story, making me the confused old woman who couldn't manage anymore. The grateful mother who handed everything over willingly. She was erasing me so carefully that even I might have believed her version eventually. I'll think about it, I said, my voice hollow. She smiled, pleased. That's all I ask. I just want what's best for you, Mom. After she left, after she'd fed me soup and tucked me into my own couch and kissed my forehead and driven away, I sat there staring at the ceiling. The documents said I had given my daughter everything. But what they didn't know is that I never signed anything at all. Would you fight back if someone tried to rewrite your entire existence? Or would you let them convince you it was for your own good? Ilara called me the next morning before I'd even finished my coffee. I have someone I need you to meet, she said. Her name is Dr. Rowan Klein. She's a forensic document examiner, one of the best in the state. If anyone can prove those signatures are forged, it's her. An hour later, I was sitting in a small office that smelled like old paper and chemicals. Dr. Rowan Klein was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that moved with careful precision. She reminded me of a surgeon, the way she handled documents like they were living things. Mrs. Armand, she said, spreading my documents across a large light box. I need you to understand something. Most forgeries are obvious. Shaky lines, wrong proportions, hesitation marks. But these. She tapped the papers. These are good. Whoever did this studied your signature carefully. My stomach turned. My daughter. Rowan's expression didn't change. She'd probably heard worse. Let's see what the evidence tells us. She pulled out a magnifying glass and leaned over the signatures, her face inches from the paper. I watched her trace invisible lines, murmur to herself, make notes on a yellow pad. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. I barely breathed. Finally, she straightened up and pointed to one of the signatures. Look here. See this part of the N in Nadine? The angle of the pressure shifts mid-stroke. It's subtle, but it's there. This wasn't written. It was traced. Someone put your real signature underneath, probably on a light table, and copied it. Relief flooded through me so fast I almost cried. You can prove it? I can prove it, Rowan said firmly. She pulled out more equipment. Cameras, special lights, measuring tools I didn't have names for. But there's more. These documents have digital metadata embedded in them. When were these supposedly signed? October 14th, I said. And the digital file was created October 13th at 2:17 in the morning. Which means someone was preparing these documents while you were asleep, I finished. I go to bed at 10 every night. Rowan made another note. We're going to pull everything, the metadata, the digital trail, email headers, IP addresses. If your daughter did this, she left breadcrumbs. People always do. For the first time since Ilara's phone call, I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite hope, I wasn't ready for hope yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Like air in a room that had been sealed shut. What if the judge doesn't believe it? I asked quietly. What if she's more convincing than the evidence? Rowan looked at me over her glasses. Mrs. Armand, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've testified in over 200 cases. Evidence doesn't lie. People lie. And when we lay out everything we're going to find, there won't be any room for doubt. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the light table. About my daughter sitting in some office or maybe her own home, my real signature underneath a blank piece of paper, her hand carefully tracing each loop and curve. Had she felt guilty? Had she hesitated even once? Or had she been so focused on the money, the property, the inheritance she thought she deserved that my actual existence didn't even matter anymore? I'd raised her to be independent, strong, to take what she needed from life. But somewhere along the way, take what you need had turned into take everything, and I never saw it happening. My phone buzzed. Another text from her. How are you feeling, Mom? Better today. I stared at those words, so caring, so loving, and felt nothing but coldness. Much better, sweetheart, I typed back. Thank you for checking on me. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, I love you, Mom. Let me know if you need anything. I set the phone down without responding. Because if my own daughter traced my hand to steal my life, what else had she stolen from me that I didn't even know about? If you discovered someone you loved had been planning your erasure for months, could you ever look at them the same way again? Rowan called me 3 days later, and I knew from her voice that she'd found something. Can you come to my office? She asked. I need to show you what we've uncovered. When I arrived, her desk looked like a detective's caseboard, papers pinned up, colored strings connecting different documents, sticky notes everywhere. It was overwhelming and oddly beautiful, like watching someone build a truth out of scattered pieces. Sit down, Rowan said, and her tone made my heart race. Because this is bigger than we thought. She pulled up her computer screen and turned it toward me. The digital documents were created from an IP address registered to Morrison & Associates law firm. That's where your daughter works. My hands went cold. She did this from her office. At 2:17 a.m. on October 13th. Which means she either stayed late or came in early, when no one else would be around. Rowan clicked to another screen. But here's where it gets interesting. The email that sent these documents to the filing office? It came from a paralegal named Jessica Chen. And according to LinkedIn, she pulled up another window. Jessica Chen and your daughter went to college together. Roommates, actually. The betrayal kept expanding, like ripples in water. It wasn't just my daughter. She'd recruited help. Made it a conspiracy. There's more, Rowan continued. She showed me document after document, earlier drafts with cut and paste errors, fragments where my name had been inserted into templates, track changes that hadn't been hidden properly. Whoever prepared these used a standard template. See this phrase here? Hereby relinquishes all claim to said property. That exact wording appears in 17 other estate documents filed in this county over the past 2 years. What does that mean? It means your daughter didn't write these from scratch. She copied a formula. And she made mistakes. Rowan pulled out a highlighted page. Look at this paragraph. It says the undersigned Nadine Armand, formerly known as. And then the sentence just stops. Because in the template, there was probably another name there. She deleted it but forgot to delete the whole phrase. I stared at the half-finished sentence, my mind spinning. These weren't just forged signatures. This was a sloppy, rushed job disguised as professional legal work. How did no one catch this? I asked. Because most people don't look that closely. They see official letterhead, notary stamps, legal language, and they assume it's legitimate. That's what fraud relies on, people's trust in the system. Elara, who'd been quiet in the corner, finally spoke up. We have enough to file an emergency motion. We can freeze all transfers, stop everything in its tracks. And then what? I asked. She's still my daughter. She's still someone who tried to steal your entire life, Elara interrupted gently but firmly. I know this is hard, Nadine. But you have to decide, do you want justice, or do you want to protect someone who's already proven they won't protect you? The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about the pencil marks on my kitchen table leg, the Mother's Day towel, the framed photo in my living room of her college graduation, where she'd thanked me in her speech for sacrificing everything so she could succeed. She'd been right about the sacrifice. She just hadn't mentioned she'd help herself to what was left. File the motion, I said quietly. Rowan nodded and started gathering papers. One more thing. We found draft versions of these documents dated back to July 15th, to be exact. That's almost 3 months ago. 3 months. She'd been planning this for 3 months. Through summer dinners and phone calls and "I love you, Mom" texts. How long had I been a mark instead of a mother? The evidence is piling up, Rowan said, organizing everything into folders. But Mrs. Armand, I need you to prepare yourself. Evidence means nothing if the judge doesn't believe it. And your daughter will have her own lawyer. They'll try to discredit everything we present. They'll say you're confused, forgetful, maybe even that you're making this up. Let them try, I said, and I barely recognized my own voice. It was harder than I'd ever heard it. I know what's true. As I drove home that evening, I passed by my daughter's apartment complex. Her car was in the parking lot, lights on in her window. She was home, probably making dinner or watching TV or texting friends. Living her normal life while my whole existence was being picked apart in document analysis and legal filings. And the worst part? She had no idea that every breadcrumb she'd carelessly dropped was leading straight back to her. The evidence was piling up. But evidence means nothing if the judge doesn't believe it. What would you do if you knew the fight ahead might destroy your family forever, but losing meant erasing yourself? The courthouse smelled like old wood and fear. I sat on a hard bench outside the courtroom, Elara beside me with her briefcase full of evidence, and watched people shuffle past. Lawyers in expensive suits, families arguing in whispers, a man in handcuffs being led down the hallway. Everyone here was fighting for something. Everyone here had already lost something. They're late, Elara muttered, checking her watch. She meant my daughter and her lawyer. They were supposed to be here 20 minutes ago for the emergency hearing. The judge had agreed to see us today, to review our motion to freeze all property transfers. But they had to show up first. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd barely slept in 4 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those forged signatures, those traced lines, my daughter's careful handwriting on documents that were supposed to erase me. Then I heard heels clicking on marble floor. My daughter appeared at the end of the hallway, walking beside a tall man in a gray suit, her lawyer, I assumed. She looked polished, professional, like she was here for a routine business meeting, not to defend herself against fraud charges. When her eyes met mine, she didn't flinch, didn't look away, just gave me a small, sad smile like I was the one who'd disappointed her. That smile made my stomach turn. They disappeared into a conference room, and Elara squeezed my hand. Remember what we practiced. Stay calm. Let the evidence speak. But when we finally entered the courtroom and I saw my daughter sitting at the opposite table, looking so confident and composed, I wondered if evidence would be enough. Because she looked like the successful lawyer daughter, and I looked like the confused old mother. And I knew which story judges usually believed. The hearing began with her lawyer speaking first, smooth, practiced words about family dynamics and misunderstandings, and how I'd been under stress lately, and might be misremembering conversations about estate planning. He made it sound so reasonable, so plausible, like I was just a forgetful woman causing problems. Then Elara stood up. She didn't waste time. She presented the notary dates, showed the judge my clinic appointment card proving I couldn't have signed on October 14th. She showed the IP address evidence, the 2 a.m. timestamps, the email headers linking back to my daughter's workplace. And I watched my daughter's face carefully. Watched the way her jaw tightened when Elara mentioned Jessica Chin. Watched her lawyer lean over to whisper something urgent in her ear. The judge looked up from the documents, his expression unreadable. I'm granting a temporary freeze on all property transfers related to this estate. We'll schedule a full hearing in 30 days to review the complete forensic analysis. Relief flooded through me so fast I almost collapsed. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was a wall, the first real barrier between me and erasure. As we left the courtroom, I had to walk past my daughter. She was standing by the door, her lawyer speaking into his phone, and for just a second we were close enough to touch. "Mom," she said quietly, "I don't understand why you're doing this." The words hit me like a slap. She was still pretending. Still acting like I was the problem. "You forged my signature," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You tried to steal my house." "I was trying to help you," she hissed back. "You're not capable of managing everything anymore. I was protecting you." Protecting me. That's what she was calling it. Protecting me by erasing me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Someone who'd learned to lie so well she might actually believe her own words. "Stay away from my house," I said, and walked past her. Outside, the autumn air felt sharp and clean. Elara was already on her phone, probably calling Rowan with the update. People walked past us on the courthouse steps, living their normal lives, while mine was being held together by temporary court orders. But for the first time in weeks, the ground beneath me felt solid. The freeze was in place. My daughter's polished lawyer had tried to rush everything through, but the judge had said no. For the first time, I realized my daughter wasn't just playing with papers. She was playing war. And I'd just won the first battle. Have you ever had to fight someone you loved just to keep existing? How do you even begin to forgive that? 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of silence. My daughter didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at my door with soup. It was like I'd ceased to exist for her the moment I fought back. And that told me everything I needed to know. I spent those weeks going through old photo albums, trying to find the moment where things changed, where love turned into strategy. But every picture looked the same: birthday parties, graduations, holidays. Her smiling. Me smiling. Both of us pretending we knew what we meant to each other. The full hearing was scheduled for November 5th. Rowan had been working non-stop, building our case piece by piece. She'd call me with updates, more metadata trails, more draft documents, more evidence of planning and deception. But there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. That dinner. The one that never happened. The evening I'd put on my navy shawl and gotten ready to walk into my daughter's home, not knowing she'd already decided I didn't deserve my own. I'd been so excited that day. She rarely invited me over anymore. She was always too busy with work, too tired, too scheduled. But that Thursday, she'd called specifically to invite me. Made my favorite meal. Said she wanted to spend time with me. And now I understood why. She'd needed to keep me distracted. Keep me happy and unaware while documents moved through legal channels. The dinner wasn't about love. It was about strategy. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through our texts from that week. Found the conversation. Her, "Mom, can you come for dinner Thursday? I miss you." Me, "Of course, sweetheart. What time?" Her, 7. "And Mom? Bring your spare house key. I want to make a copy in case of emergencies." My blood ran cold reading it now. The spare key. She'd asked for my spare key. And I'd almost brought it, almost handed it over like the trusting fool I was. If Alara hadn't called when she did, I would have walked into that dinner, given my daughter a key to my house, eaten pot roast and smiled and never known I was signing my own eviction notice. I thought about calling her, confronting her about the key, about the dinner, about all of it. But what would be the point? She'd just lie again. Make it sound reasonable. Tell me I was confused. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I changed my locks. The locksmith came on a Tuesday afternoon, and I watched him remove the old hardware, the locks I'd installed when I first bought this house 34 years ago. The ones my daughter had used her whole childhood, letting herself in after school, stumbling home late from teenage parties, visiting on holidays. Those locks had meant trust, family, home. The new ones meant protection, boundaries, war. When he finished and handed me the new keys, I felt something break inside my chest. Because I was locking my daughter out. Actually, physically preventing her from entering my home. What kind of mother does that? But then I remembered, what kind of daughter tries to steal her mother's entire existence? That night, my phone rang. Her name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Mom. Her voice sounded strange. Tight. Yes. Are you still coming to Thanksgiving? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Thanksgiving. Like we were a normal family with normal problems. Like she hadn't spent months forging documents and plotting my erasure. I don't think that's a good idea, I said carefully. Silence on the other end. Then, so you're really doing this? You're really choosing lawyers over your own daughter? Choosing lawyers. Like I'd started this. Like I was the one who'd betrayed trust. You forged my signature, I said, my voice shaking. You tried to take my house. My accounts. Everything I've worked for my entire life. I was trying to help you, she shouted, and for the first time, the mask cracked. You're old, Mom. You can't manage everything. I was making sure you'd be taken care of. By making me homeless? By making sure the estate was handled properly before you, she stopped. Before I what? My voice was ice. Before I died. The silence that followed was deafening. That's not what I meant, she said finally, but her voice was hollow. You were waiting for me to die, I said, the truth settling over me like snow. You couldn't wait for me to die, so you decided to erase me while I was still alive. Mom, that's not. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone down. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at my backyard, the garden I'd planted, the fence I'd painted, the trees I'd watched grow for decades. All of it almost stolen by someone I'd given life to. The dinner that never happened had saved my life. If I'd gone that night, if I'd walked into her home with my spare key and my trust and my love, I would have smiled through my own funeral. But I didn't go. And now she knew, I wasn't the confused old woman she could manipulate. I realized she wasn't asking if I was okay when she called that night. She was asking if I was still alive. Would you still love someone who couldn't wait for you to disappear? The courtroom was packed when we arrived for the full hearing. I didn't expect that. I thought it would be quiet, just us, the lawyers, the judge. But apparently word had spread. A daughter allegedly forging her mother's documents to steal an estate? That was the kind of case people noticed. I sat in the front row, Elara on one side, Rowan on the other. My daughter sat across the aisle with her lawyer, a different one this time, I noticed. Probably the first one had quit when he saw how bad the evidence looked. She didn't look at me. Kept her eyes straight ahead, jaw set, hands folded on the table like she was posing for a professional photograph. The judge entered and everyone stood. Judge Margaret Holt, according to the nameplate. She looked tired, like she'd been doing this too long and had seen too much. "Let's begin," she said, settling into her chair. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings. Miss Finch, you may present your evidence." Elara stood up, and I watched her transform into someone I barely recognized. Sharp, methodical, merciless. She spoke in clear, simple language, laying out everything Rowan had discovered. The timestamps, the IP addresses, the email trails, the forged signatures under lightbox analysis, the metadata showing 2 a.m. document creation. And then she did something I wasn't expecting. She projected everything onto a screen. Suddenly the entire courtroom could see it. My signature next to the forged one, the pressure points highlighted in red, the traced lines obvious even from the back row. The draft documents with their cut and paste errors blown up to poster size. The email headers showing my daughter's workplace address. It was like watching my erasure in high definition. I heard people in the gallery whisper. Heard someone gasp. Felt the weight of judgment shift in the room. My daughter's new lawyer stood up, trying to object, trying to claim the evidence was circumstantial or improperly obtained or something legal that didn't matter because the truth was right there on that screen for everyone to see. Then Rowan took the stand. She spoke like a surgeon, precise, unemotional, devastating. She walked the judge through every piece of forensic evidence, every technical detail, every breadcrumb my daughter had left behind. The signature on these documents was not written, Rowan said, pointing to the projected image. It was traced. You can see here where the pen pressure decreases mid-stroke, then increases again. That's consistent with someone pausing to check their reference material. A genuine signature flows continuously. This one doesn't. Judge Holt leaned forward, studying the screen. And you're certain? I've analyzed over 10,000 signatures in my career, Your Honor. I'm certain. The judge turned to my daughter's lawyer. Does your client wish to testify? I watched my daughter's face. Watched her lawyer lean over and whisper urgently. Watched her shake her head slightly. She wasn't going to speak. Wasn't going to defend herself. Because what could she say that wouldn't make it worse? Your Honor, her lawyer said, standing. Given the complexity of the evidence, we'd like to request a continuance to. Denied, Judge Holt said flatly. I've seen enough. The forensic evidence is overwhelming. The timeline is impossible. The digital trail is clear. She looked directly at my daughter. Ms. Armand, did you forge your mother's signature on these documents? The courtroom went silent. My daughter opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I was trying to help her, she said finally, her voice barely audible. That's not what I asked. Did you forge her signature? Longer silence. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, yes. The word hung in the air like smoke. People in the gallery shifted, whispered. Someone's phone buzzed and was quickly silenced. Judge Holt made a note on her paper. I'm voiding all disputed documents. Full ownership of the property and accounts is restored to Mrs. Nadine Armand. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges related to fraud and forgery. Criminal charges. The words echoed in my head. My daughter's face went white. Her lawyer immediately started talking. Something about first offenses and family circumstances and how prosecution wasn't in anyone's interest. But Judge Holt had already moved on, scheduling follow-up dates, issuing orders. It was over. We stood to leave, and I had to walk past my daughter again. This time she looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not guilt. Not remorse. Just pure, simple fear of consequences. Mom, she whispered as I passed. Please. I kept walking. Outside, Elara was talking about next steps and protective orders and criminal proceedings, but I barely heard her. People from the gallery were coming up to me, strangers, telling me they were proud of me, that I did the right thing, that their own families had similar stories. I just nodded and smiled and tried not to collapse. Because I'd won. The evidence had spoken. The judge had believed me. But in that silence after my daughter confessed, I knew, the courtroom had seen her mask fall, and there was no putting it back on. Have you ever watched someone you love lose everything because of their own choices? Does winning feel like winning when the cost is this high? The call came 2 days later from my daughter's lawyer. Mrs. Armand, my client would like to discuss a settlement. I was sitting in my kitchen in my house, that was legally and completely mine again, when he said it. The same table where I'd sat in darkness after Elara's first call. The same chair where I'd traced those pencil marks and wondered if love was just another word for manipulation. What kind of settlement? I asked. My client is willing to withdraw all claims, issue a formal apology, and agree to a restraining order if necessary. In exchange, she's requesting that you not pursue criminal charges. I set my coffee cup down carefully. She wants me to protect her. She's asking for mercy, he corrected. This is still your daughter, Mrs. Armand. Still my daughter. The words felt hollow. Because daughters don't forge signatures. Daughters don't trace their mother's hands on light tables at 2 in the morning. Daughters don't wait for their mothers to die. I need to think about it, I said. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. The house was quiet, too quiet. I'd gotten used to silence these past weeks, but this felt different. Final. Elara had already told me the district attorney was interested in the case. Forgery, fraud, attempted theft. These weren't small crimes. My daughter could face real consequences. Prison time, maybe. Definitely a criminal record. Her law career would be over before it really started. Part of me wanted that. Wanted her to understand what she'd tried to do. Wanted her to face real punishment for treating my life like something disposable. But another part of me, the part that still remembered teaching her to tie her shoes, helping her with homework, holding her when she cried, that part was screaming. I walked through my house, room by room. The living room where she'd taken her first steps. The hallway where we'd measured her height. The bedroom that used to be hers, now converted to a guest room that never had guests. How do you mourn someone who's still alive? That night, I dreamed about the dinner that never happened. In the dream, I went. I wore my navy shawl, brought my spare key, sat at her table and ate pot roast. And when I tried to leave, the door wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't open. I was trapped in her house, invisible, while she walked through me like I was already a ghost. I woke up sweating, tangled in sheets, my heart racing. At 7 a.m., I called Elara. I'm accepting the settlement, I said. Nadine, you don't have to. I know. But I'm tired, Elara. I'm so tired of fighting. I want my house back. I want my name back. I want my life back. And then I want to be done. Silence on the other end. Then, okay. I'll draw up the papers. The settlement was finalized within a week. My daughter signed documents returning everything. Not that there was anything left to return, since the judge had already voided the transfers. But it was official now. Legal. Binding. She also signed a statement agreeing to no contact unless I initiated it first. Essentially, a voluntary restraining order. We never spoke about what she'd done. Never had a confrontation where she apologized or explained or begged forgiveness. The lawyers handled everything, passing papers back and forth like we were strangers in a business transaction. Which, I suppose, we were now. On the day the final papers were signed, I stood in my kitchen and looked at the Mother's Day towel still hanging on the oven. "World's best mom," it said in cheerful letters. I took it down, folded it carefully, and put it in a box in the garage. Some things you keep. Some things you just can't look at anymore. People ask me if I feel better now that it's over. If justice was enough. If I regret not pursuing criminal charges. The truth is, I don't know. I got my house back. My accounts back. My name on all the right documents. But what I lost, trust, family, the daughter I thought I raised, those don't come back with court orders. My daughter checked herself into therapy after the settlement. Her lawyer told me that, like it was supposed to make me feel better. Like 6 weeks of counseling could undo months of calculated betrayal. Maybe it can. Maybe she'll learn something. Maybe she'll actually understand what she did. But when I looked at my daughter's face during that settlement signing, I knew I had already lost her forever. And she'd lost me too, long before the lawyers got involved. Would you choose peace over punishment if it meant never getting real answers? Or would you need to see them pay? 6 months have passed since the settlement. My house is still mine. Legally, completely, undeniably mine. I've updated all the paperwork, changed all the passwords, put everything in order. My lawyer even helped me set up a trust with an independent executor, just in case. No one will ever be able to erase me again. But the funny thing about winning is that it doesn't feel like winning. Not really. I still wake up sometimes at 2 in the morning, the same time my daughter was creating those documents, and I lie there in the dark wondering if I missed other signs. Other moments where she was calculating instead of loving. Other times when I was just a means to an end. The house feels bigger now. Emptier. I used to think I was keeping it for family dinners and holiday gatherings, for grandchildren I hoped would exist someday. But there won't be grandchildren. There won't be dinners. There's just me and these walls and the ghost of a relationship that maybe never existed the way I thought it did. My daughter sent me a letter last month. It came in the mail handwritten, 3 pages long. I let it sit on my kitchen table for 2 weeks before I opened it. She said she was sorry. Said therapy was helping her understand what she'd done. Said she'd been under financial pressure from student loans and credit cards and had convinced herself she was just accelerating the inevitable. That phrase stuck with me. Accelerating the inevitable. Like my death was just a scheduling problem. She said she loved me. Said she always had. Said she hoped someday I could forgive her. I read that letter 5 times, looking for something real. Some acknowledgement that went beyond legal liability and therapy speak. Some evidence that she understood she hadn't just tried to steal property. She tried to erase her own mother from existence. I never found it. The letter sits in a drawer now, next to old birthday cards and photos I can't bring myself to throw away. Evidence of something that used to be real, or maybe never was. People in town know the story now. Small communities talk, and court cases become gossip. I get looks sometimes at the grocery store. Sympathy. Pity. Sometimes admiration, from people who wish they'd had the courage to fight back against their own family betrayals. A woman stopped me last week, someone I'd never met before, and told me her brother had done something similar to their mother. They'd let it go, tried to keep the peace, and by the time they realized what was happening, their mother had been moved to a facility and the house was sold. You saved yourself, she said, gripping my hand. That takes strength most people don't have. I nodded and smiled, but inside I was thinking, I didn't save myself. I just survived. There's a difference. The navy shawl still hangs in my closet. I've never worn it again. Never even touched it since that night I was supposed to go to dinner. Sometimes I think about throwing it away, but I can't quite bring myself to do it. It's evidence too, in its own way. Evidence of the woman I was before I learned what my daughter was capable of. Last week, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a real estate agent. Not to sell. I'm not ready for that, may never be ready. But to get the house appraised, to understand its value, to make sure all my documents are in order. Because the truth is, my daughter taught me something valuable. Trust is fragile, family is complicated, and the only person you can really count on is yourself. I've started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping other elderly people review their estate documents. You'd be surprised how common this is. Children, nieces, nephews, even caregivers slowly taking control, moving money, changing deeds. Elder erasure happens quietly, in increments, until one day you wake up and realize you've been written out of your own story. I help them read the fine print. I help them ask questions. I help them understand that saying no to family isn't betrayal, it's survival. And sometimes, late at night, I think about that dinner. The pot roast I never ate. The conversation we never had. The moment where everything could have gone differently if I'd just answered my phone 5 minutes later. Would I have noticed? Would I have questioned anything? Or would I have smiled and eaten and handed over my spare key and walked straight into my own erasure? I'll never know. What I do know is this: silence is not the same as weakness. Quiet persistence can outlast power. And erasure is never final as long as someone remembers the truth. 3 days ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 2 words, "I'm sorry." I knew it was her, using a new phone probably, to get around the no-contact agreement. I stared at those words for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. There was so much I could say. So many questions I still had. So much anger and hurt and confusion that would take years to unpack. In the end, I just deleted the message. Because justice may be quiet, but sometimes it leaves an echo. And I've learned that some echoes are better left unanswered. I'm 68 years old now. My house is paid off. My accounts are secure. My paperwork is in order. I survived something that should have destroyed me, and I did it with patience, persistence, and the help of people who believed evidence over emotion. That has to be enough. And to anyone listening to this story, anyone who's ever felt invisible, erased, or disposable, remember this: your life belongs to you. Your name belongs to you. Your signature belongs to you. Guard them carefully, because the people who love you won't need to forge them. The dinner that never happened saved my life. But what saved my soul was learning that I was worth fighting for, even when the fight was against someone I loved. Especially then. That's my story. That's my quiet justice. And that's how I learned that survival is its own kind of victory. If this story touched you or reminded you of your own experiences, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and you never know who you might inspire. Together, we can make sure no one gets erased in silence. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are worth fighting for. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.